Jess from Cook Smarts. Today I'm going to teach you how to chop an onion properly. Onions are almost a part of every single recipe we make, yet a lot of home cooks still don't really know how to chop an onion. You know, they don't really enjoy it or they makes them cry, but since we are unfortunately going to have to be chopping some onions if we're going to be doing some cooking, let's figure out how to do it the right way. This is one of the first things I teach all my clients, even folks that have been cooking for a really, really long time. Are kind of like, oh, so that's how you're supposed to do it. It's a much more efficient process. You'll get through it pretty quickly, so let's go ahead and get started. So one of the most important things about knife safety is actually always trying to create a flat, stable base with whatever you're chopping. Unfortunately, you know, most vegetables are not square or rectangular, so we have to make a stable base. So with an onion, there is a certain end that we should cut off. This is called the root end. This is the hairier end. That's where everything grows out of. We want to chop the opposite end off of the onion to create that flat, stable base. Because we want to keep the root intact to hold everything together. Kind of the mnemonic device that I use is I think about this as a almost balding man's head, and I would not want to chop off the last piece of hair that he has. So I'm going to chop off the other end. So you just want to put your onion on your chopping board using the back of your knife, because that's where a lot of the force comes from. You're just going to rock through and chop that piece of onion out. So now we've got this flat, stable base in which to rest our onion on. And now we're going to chop it in half. We're not going to peel it yet, because once we chop it in half, you'll see, again, using a rocking motion, it's much easier to peel off the skin. I like to kind of err on peeling off more skin, because if you don't peel off, sometimes I even peel off that first outer layer because it can be a little bit tough. It doesn't really soften that well in the cooking process, so I usually peel off both the skin and that first outer layer sometimes. Okay, so I'm done chopping all my onions in half. I've got basically 4 halves here, 2 onions turned into 4 halves. And from here we can chop the onion in a variety of different ways. We can do a smaller dice, we can do a larger square, or we can do strips. So those are the 3 kind of most common shapes you're ever going to need your onions in for any type of cooking. For the dices, those are really good as the base for soups that you're not going to be pureeing. For the larger squares, I use those in stir fries or also in soups that I will be pureeing, because it doesn't really matter, you know, how the chop of the onion looks. And for larger strips, I use those to caramelize. I throw them into sautés. So that's kind of how the 3 different shapes typically are used. So in order to create the dice, what we're going to do is we're going to create a really fine score. We are using the root to keep this onion intact, which helps us make the chopping, which helps us chop this onion more easily. We want to actually have the root end away from us. And what we're going to do is we're going to create really fine scores that are very close to each other. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the tip of our knife and insert it as far back as we can without going through the back of the onion, because we want to keep this all together. So put that root in, and then we're going to come down fully onto the cutting board and pull out. And then we're going to keep on doing that at about like 1/4 inch apart to create a nice fine 1/4 inch dice. So we just keep going down on it. So put the tip in, pull down all the way, and pull out. Tip in, pull down, pull out. Okay? All right, so as you can see, we've created a nice scoring in these onions. They're about 1/4 inch apart. That's exactly what we want. When we do the square, we'll just set those scores a little bit further apart. From here, what you can do, this is an optional step. It's not for everybody. What we're going to do is we're going to do another score on the onion. And basically what we do here is we're going to just shimmy this knife parallel to the cutting board. In order to do that, you want to hold the onion down with this part of your palm and just shimmy the knife through as far back as you can. This creates just an additional score so that you can have a nice fine dice. This might take a little bit of practice, might be a step that you're not super comfortable with because you are drawing the knife in a little kind of a natural way, but give it a try and see how it goes. That step is really important to have a nice sharp knife, so make sure your knife is sharp for that. And then from here, we're just going to come down parallel to that open part of the onion and just chop down. And you see how the onion itself already kind of falls apart in these nice dice because we've created those different scores. Okay, so we want to go back as far back as possible without chopping our fingers. And from here, I've got a pretty fine dice, but if you want to just run through it one more time in a nice pivoting manner like this, you can go ahead and do that. The next chop we're going to do is a square. So since we've already done the dice, a square will be quite easy. It's similar concept, except we get to do the scores a little bit further apart. So again, using the tip of your knife, this tip here, and keeping the root away from you, we're going to put the tip down towards that root, but not through all the way. Come down on it and pull out. Okay? And these I'm going to put about a little bit, like a ½ inch, not quite, or so apart. And then from here, I just do this, and I've got some nice squares. And again, what I said for this shape, I use these in stir fries, and I use these in pureed soups. So that was pretty simple, much easier than the dice. So the last thing we're going to do with this half of the onion is we're going to do strips. And strips are really great for caramelization. So what I'm going to do, this time I actually am going to chop the root off. This is the only time you're going to chop the root off. I just kind of take it apart like that. And I've got this half of the onion. And what I do is I start from, these are the two flat ends. These are the two flat ends here. And I'm going to just chop perpendicular to the flat end down, which creates the slices. If you get to a part where it's too hard to kind of hang on to the onion, you can just tip it over at 90 degrees, and that'll give you some more runway. And again, see how I'm using my knuckles as a guard? Ideally, you could be doing this without even looking, because your knuckles act as a bit of a guard for you. So that's how we would cut onions into strips. So we've got these nice strips now. Again, these would be great for caramelizing. You can just saute them with a little bit of oil, a little bit of salt, maybe even some sugar and water, and that'll create nice brown onions. All right, folks, so that's how you chop an onion 3 different ways. I hope that was not too painful of a process. I hope that you get practicing with chopping your onions. It's one of those things that does take a little bit of practice, but once you get going, it becomes easier and easier. Thanks for joining us at Cook Smarts. We're always hoping to help you live happier, simpler, and smarter in the kitchen.